like to pick up on the reading that we had for this past Sunday, the 17th of September. It was a reading from Matthew chapter 18. And I want to read just a couple of verses, verses 21 and 22. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, "Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times?" And Jesus answered, "I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times." I think when we read this passage, which is followed by the well-known parable of the unmerciful servant, and quite a grueling story about mercy and forgiveness, and then unforgiveness and betrayal. But when we read this passage, I think quite often we think that what Peter is saying is, must I allow my brother or my sister to sin against me multiple times, and each time I must forgive them? So the 7 times that he refers to, I think, is Peter asking, should I let them sin against me and forgive them, and then let them sin against me again and then forgive them again? Must we just play this back and forth between sinful behavior that harms us and hurts us in some way, and that each time we just have to suck it up and forgive them? I think that Jesus' answer is not saying that we must allow that kind of behavior to happen 77 times, and that each of those times we need to forgive, but rather that he's saying that when somebody sins against us once, we need to forgive them 77 times. Does that make sense? There's a little bit of a difference. It's not about having to tolerate and put up with abusive behavior and harmful, damaging behavior repeatedly, and every time we just have to accept it and forgive. But rather what Jesus is saying is that when somebody does something like that to us once, then we have to engage in an ongoing process of forgiveness. And he says that that type of forgiveness may take 77 attempts before we get it right. I think sometimes we treat forgiveness too glibly and simplistically, and we just say, well, I forgive you, as if that somehow now just it's all resolved and it's all done. And sometimes I think we feel pressured as Christians into being forgiving. And so we feel like when somebody harms us or hurts us, that we have to forgive them, and we have to do it quickly, and then we have to do it completely. And so we just say, well, I forgive you, and then we try to move on. And although that is sometimes possible, when we are really hurt by somebody, and often that's by someone that we're close to or someone that we respect or appreciate, those quite deep wounds of hurt require more than just one attempt at forgiveness. It is, in a sense, a spiral in which we have to forgive and then forgive again and forgive again and forgive again. And it's not that we're backsliding each time like we've unforgiven and we have to start from scratch. It rather is this spiral in which we are going deeper and deeper into a more authentic and fundamental forgiveness. And what Jesus tells us in Matthew chapter 18 is that that might take us not just 7 times, but 77 times, or 7 times 70. It may take a lot of effort and a lot of work for us to forgive. The path of forgiveness is not an easy, simplistic, superficial one. It is something that really digs deep into the core of our belly, where we have to think about the harm that someone has done to us, and then set them free and set ourselves free from any sense of resentment and pain and hurt that we hold on to afterwards. And so, dear friends, I want to encourage you, as I try to encourage myself, because I struggle with forgiveness sometimes, to work at forgiveness, not to think of it as just something that we have to do quickly and just snap it off with our fingers, but really something that we have to practice, and we have to almost daily come back and say, Lord, I forgive this person. I forgive this situation. I try to move on. I try to make peace. And I pray that God will help us to do that, because we know that Jesus has forgiven us in that way, deeply, completely, and utterly, for all of the sins that we have committed. And so he set a really good example, a challenging example for us to follow. And I pray that God will give us the courage and the strength to forgive.